Hello everyone, and welcome to another Community Team Q&A session. Today it's just part of the team. We've got Daniel Holbach, Nick Skaggs, and myself, and we've got a guest today. We have Martin Pitt, who's going to talk a little bit about what he's been working on lately. We are on ubuntuonair.com. If you're just watching this video, you should go there. You can get the video and the embedded IRC so that you can ask us your questions at any time. If you would like to ask a question, just type it into the IRC window, start it with the word question in all capitals, and we'll get a nice highlight to keep track of them so that we don't miss any. And we'll get around to answering them as soon as we can in the order that they come in. So start thinking about your questions, start asking them. But first, we've got a little bit of news from Daniel.
Hello. Yeah, we just a few days ago we had a really interesting meeting about the local team portal, and I think I can just quickly show knows what it is about. Please share my screen. All right, can you see this?
Yes.
Indeed. Brilliant. All right, so loco, Spanish for crazy, but in our case, loco means local community teams. So we built this portal maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago, and it went through loads of iterations. You can see all the teams, for example, we have in Europe. You can see upcoming events listed here. We have a couple of blog entries mentioned here, but what we wanted to do was to give local teams across the world the chance to talk a bit more about what they've been doing in the last time, to show pictures, talk about events they've been doing, things they've done in general. And we have a bit of that right now. For example, let me just show you in Asia, we can show off the Myanmar team because I know they've had a number of events recently. And you can see they also have this photo feed here, but right now you need to go to specifically their page to see what they've been doing. But what we would like to do would be for them to share their work and stuff they've done on Planet Ubuntu, which is where everybody posts news and updates all the time. So we had a meeting to discuss what we want to do there, and I'm just writing up a mini specification about how this could work. So if you're into web development, if you're generally interested in this, just watch out. I'm going to post something to the local contacts mailing list tomorrow. I'm also going to have it up on my blog. You can see it on Planet Ubuntu. Basically, just let me know if you're interested, and I'm sure we're going to have a few small tasks for you and others to get involved with.
All right, thank you, Daniel. If anyone is interested in that, like I said, let us know. We are in #Ubuntu-website. Most of the developers for the local team portal hang out in there all the time. All right, so we have a special guest today. Martin, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do at Canonical?
Hello, everyone. Well, I've been doing this Ubuntu thing for like 10 years now, so I think by now I've touched pretty much everything in Ubuntu. But these days, my main efforts are in the QA area. So since about for 2 years or so, I've been in the QA team now, mostly focusing on creating some new test technology so that we can write automatic tests for things which haven't been possible before, like for hardware devices or for system daemons, etc. And more recently, I've been working a lot on automatically testing packages which flow into the distribution. So that's the whole scope of what we call auto package test, or Deb 8 these days. So since we switched the whole Ubuntu ship to be quality first and not push everything that goes into the distro by the beta freeze and then trying to mop up the things that we broke, these days we have a rather rigid continuous integration process. So we have about 450 or so packages in Ubuntu have automatic tests now. And whenever whenever one of these packages gets uploaded, or any package that one of these packages depends on, we automatically run their tests. And if anything fails, we can hold back the package that breaks something. So instead of landing it and someone has to discover that something goes wrong maybe weeks after we landed it and everyone's mind is somewhere else, we immediately notice and can identify the offender and maybe fix the regression right away. And it's a lot of work, of course, and it's not like we are far from having full coverage, but it has been proven quite useful in several times, and like keeping off the disasters from everyone's development series that we used to have in the past years. And well, otherwise, there's quite a lot of side projects I'm working on. So these days, it's mostly modernizing our init system in the sense of catching up with Debian on the sys5 init front, and also going towards integrating systemd. So as many of you might know, we finally decided to follow Debian and also most other distributions in moving to systemd, and that's a lot of work now after we spent a lot of years going the upstart route. Yeah, so I guess that's a summary of my current activity.
So you say we finally decided to follow Debian, but really the choice was made to follow Debian pretty quickly after Debian finally made the choice to use systemd as the default, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. And to be honest, after Debian has debated it for like so many months with so many thousand replies, pretty much everything there is to say about it has been said and thought and discussed. So to be honest, I'm really quite happy that we didn't have all this conversation again in Ubuntu. And so Mark just said, putting out his sceptical finger, yes, we follow Debian, period, and we had the discussion just once. And also really, like, at least two of the people in Debian who have participated in this discussion in the technical committee are also very active in Ubuntu, like Colin Watson and Steve Langashek. So they always kept the Ubuntu side in their mind. I suppose. So.
And it was nice that because everything that was discussed in Debian was discussed in the open, that we could all just follow along with that and we didn't have to repeat it.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like personally, I'm quite happy that we do this because it gets us closer to all the other other distros, and also makes it easier as an upstream to provide a modern server startup and init script integration for all the distributions out there without having to consider like multiple major systems. Like, I mean, it should be public knowledge that I think we should have done it a lot earlier, but yeah, now it's a lot more work to move to it, but I think it's still the right decision, even though it's a lot of work now.
Is there anything interesting in this discussion for the regular Ubuntu user?
Well, as much discussion as this whole topic has caused, I think, like if I call my mom the regular Ubuntu user, I would even think no. Like, if my mother recognizes that like any difference, then we've done things wrong, because this is all so low level in the stack, and we are concerned about things just working and your hardware doing the right thing if you plug it in, or your network device is coming up at the right time, or service is not starting too early or too late. So I hope that for the most part, the effects that people will see is that maybe their battery life and their RAM usage will improve because we only start services on demand and not whenever we can. So it's a little more how to say that? Well, it's maybe with systemd it's possible to start services a lot more on demand instead of always. I mean, it has always been possible to do this in Upstart as well, but we've never really done this to the full extent. And since we now have lots of other people outside the Ubuntu community working on stuff like this, my hope is that it'll be a lot easier to take their work and benefit from it.
Brilliant.
But as I said, so you please don't expect any of this like in the next weeks or so. We still have a lot of groundwork to do before we can even start on the systemd transition itself. Because we've diverged from Debian for several years in terms of sys5 init and also Upstart, and so there is a couple, like maybe 3 or 4 preconditions which we first have to solve before we can start working on systemd. But you can try it out today in the topic, so you can boot with it. You will certainly run into some issues when you try to upgrade packages and so on, but in general, for desktop, it's working good enough. And like personally, I've run with it for weeks without even noticing, so I just mostly forgot about it.
Cool.
But yeah, so now it's at the stage where developers can start working on it, I'd say.
Okay, cool. And for the other use cases, you mentioned desktop. How about server and
phone,
other configurations? Does it work there as well?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So in Fedora and Arch Linux and whatnot, so most of these are desktop oriented, which means that on the desktop it's relatively simple to make systemd work, and it by and large works today. And this situation is not like that on a server because there is pretty much only one credible server distribution out there with systemd, that's RHEL 7, and that has only been out for a couple of months now. So I expect that we will have a lot more to do on the server and even more on the phone, because like on the phone, the phone is full of Upstart jobs which we need to convert, and even the server team has spent many years fine-tuning their Upstart scripts and changing our packages with Upstart integration. So on the server, I don't expect this to work at all, really. Like if you try to run with it, you will probably find that a lot of your services don't start up, and if you use things like iSCSI or anything boot critical, it will probably not even boot. And we haven't even tried that so far because, as I said, we still have to sort out a couple of preconditions before we can even attempt this. But that said, of course, if anyone is interested in that, like with anyone, I mean anyone, because it's not really limited to Canonical or even the Ubuntu community, they are of course welcome to try it out and see what breaks and work on that, like providing systemd counterparts for the Upstart units, or just seeing how it goes, or doing boot speed comparisons or whatnot.
All right, we've had some questions on IRC, so we'll go ahead and go through those. But while we're answering them, please continue asking. We've got plenty of time left. So if you have any questions for Martin or for us on the community team on any topic, anything having to do with Ubuntu, anything having to do with community, or anything else, feel free to ask that in the IRC. So first of, Aaron asks, will Ubuntu run on a Galaxy Note 2? So if you go to wiki.ubuntu.com/touch/devices, I believe that's the URL, that'll list all of the supported and semi-supported devices. The images that Canonical produces are only for the Nexus line, so the Nexus 4, the 2013 Nexus 7, and the Nexus 10 are the images that we provide. There's community ports for other devices, including the Nexus 5 and some others. So check that website, see if the Note 2 is listed on there, and what state that image might be in. We have a community of porters. We've had a lot of people from the XDA community who've been working on porting Ubuntu to different devices that CyanogenMod has been ported to. So that's the official list. It's pretty well updated, so if it's not on there, then it doesn't currently run. But we also have a porting guide if you're interested in that kind of thing, where we detail what you need to do in order to port Ubuntu to a new device. Again, it's largely based on the work that goes into porting CyanogenMod, so if you've got a Cyanogen image for the Note 2, that would definitely help get you started. All right, Bogdan asks, is Ubuntu 14.04 almost ready? It's stable enough. 14.04 has been released for a few months now, so yes, it is stable and it's our long-term support. If you're asking about 14.10, which is our current development release, I will let one of these other guys talk about it because I haven't upgraded yet.
Yeah, I've been using it for a couple of weeks already, and it's been suiting me very well.
Well, I've been using it since day one, basically, like dog fooding as I am. And like if you compare it, like if you have ever run a development series like 2 years or longer ago, then it's like night and day. But be warned, there is still the occasional like problem that creeps in, which causes serious trouble. So we had at least one, maybe 3 weeks ago, when we at the Malta sprint, which basically broke most people's boot. There was an easy workaround, but you had to jump on RC and ask people. So it still unfortunately happens. But at least for each of these incidences, we treat them as an insult these days. Like back then, it was just normal day-to-day development business. But these days, when that happens, it's a catastrophe, and we actually sit down and see how we can prevent this in the future. So for the last 3 or 4 of these kind of catastrophes, we did that, and we have like measures in place to prevent this from happening again. Like for the most part, that's by writing more of these auto package tests and refining our test machinery to test like new kernels more early, and like testing the boot system when we change it more early so that we can catch it in the test machinery in the like proposed pocket instead of releasing it to everyone and then hear the world screaming.
So you mentioned earlier the continuous integration that we're using now for our development release. Can you and Nick talk a little bit about how that works, how package updates flow into the development release now?
Sure. Should I take this?
Yeah, go ahead, Martin. That's fine.
Right. So in the past days, like every developer uploaded directly into the development series, and then the package would get built in Launchpad and for all the architectures, and then whenever it was built, it was basically public and on the mirror. And as soon as anyone tried to do this upgrade, it would get the new version. And this has caused all these problems that we saw, like this upgrade trying to remove half of your system, or you call the library which broke an API and all your programs crashed and so on. So these days we have a staging area, and that's called dash proposed for those who are interested, which is the place where all the uploads go. Like no developer can upload directly to the development series. And then all the package building happens in that staging area. And once the packages are all built, we have some automatic checks, they're called Brittany, which make sure that the package is actually installable and does not cause other packages to become uninstallable, and it's built everywhere and so on. And also this machinery runs the automatic tests. So for example, if we upload the new libgdk and that fails to build on ARMHF, we would just block that package in proposed, and no human user would ever get this. And even if it builds everywhere and it maybe breaks the installer tests, we would still hold it back so that we can either fix GDK or adjust the installer to cope with the changes in GDK. And only as soon as everything works, the whole batch gets moved to the development series, which has the effect that the development series is always installable, it's always available for all architectures, and it does not have any regression which we can detect automatically with our tests. So this is why it's like so much more stable these days. So basically you can dist upgrade every day without watching too hard, and you should at least get a bootable machine. Like with the few exceptions that I mentioned. I mean, nothing is perfect, and there's always room for improvement, but that's the general workflow now.
All right, and so I can talk a little bit about from a phone image perspective, seeing as that's slightly different, although it follows the exact same philosophy that Martin laid out. The idea being we have on the phone images actually have 3 channels. So we have a devil proposed channel, which would mirror exactly what Utopic is right now to the desktop. We have a devil channel, which is sort of this interesting quasi-stable channel because it is sort of, I guess that would be, the devil channel would probably mirror Utopic a bit better. The devil proposed would be the proposed pocket where all the things are happening. And finally, the stable channel would be very similar to maybe the LTS being trusty. At any rate, the packages that flow actually go through a series of acceptance tests, and there's a lot of manual testing as well, partially because from a phone image perspective, we don't have quite the library of auto package testing going on the phone images quite yet. It's getting there. It's building and building each day. But the idea is that basically you have silos, and before things can land, they have to be tested. And so there's a human verification process as well, and things are bunched together. So again, auto package is really great because whenever I change something in an individual package, it will pull all the dependencies and run those tests as well to make sure we don't have regressions anywhere. The silo concept for the phone images, it works very similarly. The idea is that anything that could have impacts on something else or its dependencies should all go in together and be tested as one big change. And once those things are vetted out and we feel confident about them, they go into the devil proposed channel. So if you're a user who likes to live on the bleeding edge and who wants to help test, again, someone who would be running Utopic today could follow that devil proposed channel and flash your phone just about every day and get a new image, which is pretty raw and cut. And then from there, we actually run a series of acceptance tests every day. You can see those on ci.ubuntu.com. And you can also see a lot of the other stuff that Martin's talking about. ci.ubuntu.com is sort of a front end for, it's a nice interface, shall we say, for a lot of the raw Jenkins output and a lot of the raw testing output that you see. And it's in a much more understandable, interpretable format. There's lots of pretty graphs and pictures. You can see nice colors, red, green, yellow, all very understandable. So the idea being that when we have a green image then on the dashboard and manual verification looks good as well, we can go ahead and migrate that down onto the devil channel. And then, of course, every once in a while, basically at the moment when there has been a Ubuntu release, but at any time we wish, we could also roll what's in devil down to stable. And the idea being there, you would have even more testing, even more manual verification. And that works very similar to what we've done on the desktop side. Just the technical bits are a little different, but the concepts are all the same. And that represents a huge change. And like Martin was saying, it's one of the reasons why you can run, why I can also be running Utopic from day one. And apart from that, I think we've been down to maybe one. I think there was maybe one last cycle as well, one catastrophic event that would have prevented something. I think it only affected folks with NVIDIA or NVIDIA cards, I think. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I was completely unaffected last cycle. Nothing blew up for me. But that is a far cry from a few cycles ago where you would have sort of daily contentions at times, and so that's what this CI process has really brought to the table. Martin, I wanted to ask you about aport as well. I think in his question he mentioned errors.ubuntu.com, and I know there's some changes to aport. I don't know if you know about those. Basically, making aport a bit more user-friendly, and I don't know. Could you just talk about errors.ubuntu.com a little bit, and specifically about aport and how that process works?
Yeah, sure, why not? So originally, aport has been a tool for developers by developers, basically. So we only turned it on for the development release because, as you said, actually reporting issues was quite involved. So you had to create a Launchpad account and put in a bug description, and then put up with all the responses that developers would send you, like, can you try this and that, and basically do the whole bug filing and answering process. I mean, in the ideal case, you just saw some technical gobbledygook, and at some point the developer might have said, hey, can you test this PPA over there, or can you test this package and whatever, and then you could be involved in that in the bug verification process that way. But of course, this totally doesn't scale for a stable release, because if suddenly you have millions and millions of non-technical people trying to report crashes, we really don't want them all to go to Launchpad and filing bugs, both for their sake, because most of them would just be completely overwhelmed with that, and also for our sake, because developers don't scale with that number of users. So we basically built, well, where we is mostly Evan and Ria, really, built a real crash database where you could basically report crashes with a single click. And by the way the system is built, we don't need to be concerned so much about exposing potentially private data to a public bug tracker, but we would handle all the bits that could potentially have sensitive data, like, in the servers, and never expose it to any users. So this is a scalable system where a lot of people can report their issues to. And for the first time, we actually get a mostly accurate measurement of where the biggest problems and crashes and package installation failures and whatnot are in Ubuntu stable releases. Because users are probably using our system in a completely different way than us as developers. Like, let's face it, we spend most of our times in text terminals and Vim and maybe the browser, but that's not really what most users do. So Launchpad View has always been skewed by this developer-centric thing. So this is basically replacing our guesses where the problems are by actual data, and making it a lot more scalable and simple to report. So we have an aggregated view of which packages or which package versions create the most problems, and we actually use that. So like the desktop team or so, they check this every other day to see which things we should fix in our stable releases, because they crash like once a day. And so we basically constantly sifting off the top 10, 20 crashes and work on them, and that has an actually measurable effect on the stability, because if you fix the top 10 crashes, this will probably represent like 90% of the problems that people run into every day. And then once you're done with the top 10, you get the next top 10 and so on, because it's the usual 80-20 principle with MS, with so many things. Yeah, do you have any particular questions, like you or anyone on RSC? So this is just a more the general intro.
Yeah, the question I specifically had about aport was, I don't know if you know about some of the changes that they were planning on making to the actual interface. So the part that users see, which is a nice little report a problem dialog. I hear some of that is going to be reworked to be a bit nicer.
Yeah, so to be honest, maybe someone from the design team is working on making that a little bit nicer. So if they do, then I'm all for that. I mean, the current interface was done by Matthew Paul Thomas, and like personally, I'm quite fine with it. But then again, I'm not at all a UI guy.
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, I'd appreciate this, but to be honest, I haven't heard about anything recent that's going on in that area.
Okay, fair enough. I don't know the details either,
So
although I know it's being looked at. So
So one thing I know is that if you have several crashes which happened, then we want to consolidate that crash dialog, that it doesn't pop up like 5 times in a row, but that you can send the whole batch in one go. So you basically just need to acknowledge the first one, and you see a list of related problems, and then you can send them all in one batch.
right.
It's not really a recent idea. It has been floating around for over a year, really. It's mostly a matter of implementation, but that's one kind of obvious and rather urgent UI improvement that needs to happen.
Right. Mike, shall we keep going? We've got a list of questions.
Yeah, we've got several that have come up. So starting with Aaron again, what version of Android is Ubuntu Touch based on? So Ubuntu Touch uses a little bit of Android at the hardware activation level and some kernel patches, and most of that is run in an LXC container that keeps it separate from Ubuntu itself, which makes it easier for us to work on Ubuntu on its own without worrying about changes to the underlying Android bits. And I think now, for at least the images that Canonical produces for the Nexus devices, that we're using the Android 4.4 tree for that. All right, what was our next question?
I think it was XUser, and he asks, how much of their time do developers allocate to solving hardware issues? I know that manufacturers don't provide drivers for Ubuntu, and it must be really challenging. And he says, but as an end user, I find it disappointing to have a 5-year-old laptop that's still incompatible with Linux.
Okay. So Martin, you answered him a little bit on IRC. Could you repeat your answer on the video for everybody?
Well, sure. So, like the way this generally works is in the community-facing team, like in the platform team, we don't usually have a fixed time allocated to fixing hardware-related issues. So we do have a whole team in Canonical who does basically hardware enablement. So whenever a vendor, whoever, HP, Dell, you name it, asks us, please make Ubuntu work on that machine, then this team is sitting down and testing all the nitty-gritty bits and writing missing drivers and enabling them and fixing them and so on. But in general, if you don't happen to have one of these machines, it's basically a matter of luck. So if you can make a developer interested enough in fixing a particular issue, maybe it's not a complete laptop, but it's only your digital camera is not working or your scanner is not working, which is usually a lot easier to do. Then you can, as I said, you can try and make a developer interested in it. But otherwise, there is no fixed process in that really. And the other bit is, like, as a distro, we don't have a lot of competency writing hardware drivers. So with some hardware, this is almost impossible to do because there's not even specifications. For some, there might be specifications, but they are not widespread enough so that the developers picked it up. But yeah, it is and remains a difficult issue. So like the hope is that the trend of the past years goes on and the hardware manufacturers themselves provide Linux drivers. So there has been a lot of improvement in that area in the past years because Linux has become a lot more popular, but it's certainly still not true for all the USB gadgets that you get out there.
But we also have like loads of experts in all of the teams who work with all the upstream projects, like other projects such as the kernel, obviously, X and all the drivers there, but also stuff like printing. For example, Till Kampeter, he's one of the experts when it comes to printing, but obviously he can't have all those printers at home. But
well, he has like half of them, but
right.
but yeah, that's actually what I meant. So it's generally not working to just sit down quietly and hoping that magically one day your hardware will work. So there is a minimum effort required that you actually need to report this, like to the kernel developers, to the printing team developers, etc., and then feed them with enough information that they can even start looking at the problem.
Yeah, the great thing about all these engineers is that they know a lot of other people as well. So if they know that you have an issue, that you have a specific piece of hardware that isn't working, they know who to talk to, and together with you can probably figure it out and have it fixed for the next release or next point release.
Yeah.
Now,
Also,
if you
what
sorry, go ahead, Martin.
okay, I was just gonna say, like, if you what happens, what usually helps is if you have a piece of hardware which is not too expensive and which is kind of cool, just put it into the hands of a developer, and they usually feel a certain urge to making that to making that work. There's not a lot of motivation to make a piece of hardware work which you can't put your fingers on. So yeah.
Now, if you're in the market for a new laptop or desktop and you want to buy something that does work with Ubuntu, we have a certification website. It's ubuntu.com/certification, and that's where we'll list all of the hardware where we work with the manufacturer to make sure that it all works properly with Ubuntu. So if you get one of those, then you should be good as far as hardware support goes. All right. We have a question, how will Docker influence app installations? So Docker is, I've seen it quite a bit on the server side, used to deploy server applications. For the phone and for the future of desktop, we're investing in click packaging, which is something that we created as a simplified Debian packaging for apps. And that gives us both confinement on installation and also lets us run apps in a security sandbox so that we don't have to worry about malicious apps going through and stealing your information or trashing your system. And that's working really well on phones, and as soon as we have Mir and Unity 8 on the desktop, we'll be able to provide those to desktop users as well. I know from on the server side that Juju charms are able to take advantage of Docker to install services and then orchestrate them together with other services deployed using Docker or not. So it's being used quite a bit on that side of things.
Yeah, and expanding on the click package thing, having worked with standard Debian and Ubuntu packaging in the past, click packages are just brilliant. They're just so much fun to work with. If you write a piece of software, you basically in the Ubuntu SDK just press the publish button and it will create the package for you. And on the review and reviewing an Ubuntu or Debian source package, it can take hours. Sometimes not the whole hour, but ages. And for click pages, this is much easier. So if you're interested in app development, have a look at developer.ubuntu.com. Right now, as Michael said, it's mostly targeted on phones and tablets, but very soon all of this is going to land on the desktop as well. So it's totally worth looking into.
And that kind of ties in with the next question from Gavin, which is, will the Software Center ever get a new UI? So on the phone, we've got, we don't have a separate app for installing. Instead, we use the scopes in the dash. So on the applications lens, you see both your installed apps and ones that are available. So if you go and you search for, say, Reddit, it'll show you any Reddit apps that you have installed as well as any Reddit apps that are available to install. And that's using the new Click package format and the new Click store, which is working really well for us. And that, as Daniel said, is coming to the desktop just as soon as we can get it there. Whether or not we're going to do it all in the dash on the desktop or revamp the Software Center app to use the new Click store, I don't think that's been I don't think there's been a final decision on that yet. But at least on the phone, it's been working really well, having it all just done in the dash.
So the next question is by Henneke, and he asks, what is the CI train and CI airline stuff I keep hearing about? He asked this right after Martin and I were sort of talking about it. So again, I guess if you're interested in that, watch about 10 minutes ago in the video. But essentially, the CI train and the CI airline is describing how phone images are built and what the CI process looks like, and we detailed all of that about 10 minutes ago, so I won't rehash it.
Yeah, and at the last
difference
online summit, we had a presentation about this. I'm just going to share the link so you can watch the video and see what Łukasz has to say about it. He's an expert, so you'll know all about it afterwards.
Yes, if you really want the technical details, Daniel's read it. You can watch Lucas's presentation. Good point.
And that'll probably answer my question also. So go back and watch that. It's probably a full hour of all the information you need on that. All right, Sina asks, why Linux is more successful in smartphones rather than laptops or PCs? So really, Linux on smartphones right now is Android, and I think a lot of that success has to do with it being pushed by Google, who already had a lot of resources and a lot of information and could dump millions and millions of dollars into getting it out there. And even they struggled, when the first G1 phone came out, it was struggling to compete with Apple at the time, and Apple even didn't have a stranglehold on the market like Windows does on laptops and desktops. So I think it was a little bit easier to get into the smartphone market than it was the desktop and PC. But we're making headway in that. We've got, I think, the 4 biggest PC manufacturers are shipping models with Ubuntu pre-installed. We've got it in stores in India and China and I believe Mexico, where you can actually go into a store and see a demo computer running Ubuntu and buy it with Ubuntu pre-installed right there. So we're making headway on that end too.
And also, I think it's mostly due to the smartphones being a relatively new thing. So smartphones were born at a time when Linux was already very capable and relatively widespread, whereas the PC market was born in a completely different time. And whenever you establish a new kind of device, you always have to drag this kind of backwards compatibility thing. And if you build something new, you don't have that. So like on the phone, you don't have millions of companies basically building their whole workflow on MS Excel or using like ancient DOS programs and Windows programs and whatnot. So that was a lot easier. And since pretty much all the other new kinds of hardware which come out today, like video recorders or smartwatches, and I'm sure that most embedded devices today run Linux as well because it's just so much cheaper to build. But this was just a logical choice for smartphones as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. On the desktop and laptop market, you're really having to compete with 30 years of Windows, not just current Windows. And so there's a lot more that's just built up over time that you've got to be able to work with and be compatible with. All right, Henneke again asks, how is release to manufacturing for phones going? Will you make it? So RTM is scheduled.
When it's ready.
What was that, Martin?
Just kidding. I said we release when it's ready. No, we don't.
No, we are committed to having something to release to our manufacturers in August. And if you want more information about the work that's going into that, there were several sessions in the last Ubuntu Online Summit covering the roadmap and the work that needs to be done. There will be not quite a freeze, but we're going to take a branch of the development release when we get closer to RTM and separate that out so that we can focus on stabilizing it and getting it ready for them to ship. As far as I know, everything's on track. There's a lot of work to do, but we know what it is, and we've got it all mapped out on a schedule to get it done in time.
And I think with all the infrastructure we now have, it's much easier to take a new feature or take an isolated bit, test it thoroughly, and get it integrated, and also deliver it to users afterwards. So.
All right. Aaron asks, will you support any more devices like CyanogenMod does? We are not planning on supporting it from Canonical side. We'll continue to support the Nexus devices, and we'll be supporting the ones that come out from our OEMs. But we won't be trying to cover the whole range of Android devices that Cyanogen does. We do want to support people who want to develop ports for those devices. Like I said earlier, we have a porting guide to walk you through what needs to be done, and we're available to answer any questions or help people who get blocked by anything while they're working on that. So we're hoping that the community will grow our number of supported devices just like they have the XDA community and others have for Android.
Arthur asks, what are the formal requirements for something like Ubuntu Mate to become an official spin? I think we've actually fielded this question in the past, and there should be an IRC page, I think, that we were able to find and redirect. But at any rate, I'll let Daniel and Mike talk a little bit more about this as well, seeing as the community council is generally involved here. But for instance, when Ubuntu and Ubuntu GNOME became flavors, the process as each new flavor has been added has been a bit more formalized. But essentially, they're looking for some maturity from the team, from the code base, from the spin and the derivative of what you actually want to do. You need to make sure that you can follow and follow the release milestone and commit to supporting this thing. And that you have people in place and that sort of stuff. But I believe, again, it's something the community council talks about. So, Daniel, Mike.
Yeah, I think it would help if you have a conversation with all the Ubuntu flavors we already have, not just because they can help you with the process, how to get everything set up. So, having a team structure, having seeds in place, so meta packages for all the packages that make up your made remix or made flavor, but also mailing this, who's responsible for looking after the bugs, that kind of thing. And once this is in place, it should be much easier to build images, build ISOs for your flavor. That's all important, but it should also be interesting for you to find out what are the best practices of these other teams? How do they work? What are the problems they face, and so on? So you can start thinking about that very early on. And then there's 2 stages. One of them is the more technical nature, where you get ISOs built regularly. And then there's also the recognition end, where the community council would recognize your flavor as an official flavor. But I guess that's further down the line. But yeah, talk to us. Just send us an email to the community council or to any one of the other flavor teams, and we're happy to help out. We're super happy to see more and more flavors coming up. That's brilliant.
And I believe one rather important requirement is also that you need to have at least one of your main developers be an Ubuntu developer, to show that like you understand how development processes work, how freezes work, how packaging works, and also that like you don't always need to find sponsors for your spin, so you can do like your work in a self-sustained and self-servicing manner.
I think all of these requirements really boil down to, are you going to be able to support your users over the lifetime of the release? So, are you going to be able to get updated packages in and fixes into the archives? Do you have the structure set up to help people when they need help? All of that is really what it all boils down to. All right, Hamsly. How much does it cost to publish an app for phones? It costs absolutely nothing. You can go sign up in the Click Store and publish an app. Sometimes in a matter of hours. It costs you nothing at all to sign up or to publish. We will have the ability to sell apps arriving soon. There'll be a minimum amount that you have to sell it for, and a portion of that will go to Canonical. But to actually publish an app, there's no charge. All right, the next question is a little bit long, so I'm going to paraphrase. This is from Spartacus, who was basically asking, why are Ubuntu phones not more mainstream than they seem to be right now? And the simple answer to that, as Martin pointed out, is because you can't buy an Ubuntu phone right now. There's nothing on the market right now that comes with Ubuntu on it. You can run it on, like I said, the Nexus devices and some other Android phones that we have images for. But as far as, until you can actually go and buy it with it already on there, we're not going to have any kind of mainstream traction. And again, Martin pointed out that we're going to grow this in a sane manner. We're not just going to go dump a bunch of phones randomly on the market without people knowing what they're getting. So we're going to take a slower approach to this and a very targeted and deliberate approach to how we bring this to market. But we have RTM in August, and sometime after that, the first phones will start to become available to purchase with Ubuntu. So you should start to see some uptick in widespread adoption at that point, but not until then. All right, what questions do we have left? We have about 5 more minutes, so if you have any questions you want to get in, you should get them in IRC now. We have a minute or two delay between what you see on the video and when we're actually saying it. So get them in now if you want to get them answered by the time we're done here. I see Aaron asked, does Ubuntu Touch have a VPN API? And it does not currently. I don't know what the plans are for that, but I know that right now there isn't anything.
Julian asked the next question, and he's asking about the laptop testing team. He says it was pretty quiet during the 14.04 launch, and he doesn't remember a beta test coming from the group. Is it still active, or are we managing laptop tests on the main Q&A group? You're correct. I don't believe it was pretty quiet during 14.04, especially in comparison to the last LTS and previous releases. Guess I don't really have a good answer for that. We still have the set of tests that we typically go through. In my mind, for laptop testing, the idea originally was because laptops were so difficult to work with Ubuntu, and there was always these different issues to help. This was similar to gosh, I'm blanking on the name of the website. Efforts in the past with community certification programs. So Michael linked to ubuntu.com/certification, which details all of the different desktops and laptops and servers and all that good stuff from various vendors that the Canonical hardware certification team actually works on. And so this was more part of the community effort, along with what was the site that Ara built and worked on for so long that I'm blanking on?
Is it like Works with Ubuntu or something like that?
Yes.
Ubuntu friendly.
Ubuntu friendly.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. So this was really born out of that same time frame and that same desire. Nowadays, I think it's a lot easier to find a laptop that works with Ubuntu. I recently bought a Dell laptop, actually, for the first time in a long time, and it just works with Ubuntu. There's literally nothing that I had to do or anything special. I grabbed the image, downloaded, installed it, done. So in some ways, it's kind of a good thing that we don't have those problems anymore. So as far as going forward, what happens with the team? I don't know. There was a push at various times to continue those hardware certification efforts, but to some extent we kind of don't need them. But you are always more than welcome to hop on the mailing list, have a discussion. Let's talk about it. Certainly, hardware testing is never a bad thing. In my mind, the scope of the team should increase beyond laptops. I guess I would put it that way. It makes sense to apply it to any hardware. So I hope that answers your question.
All right, and we have one last question. This will probably be the last one we get to, from X-User, who's asking about larger, more complex productivity apps and whether or not they'll be able to run on phones and tablets with the CPUs getting more powerful and you getting more RAM and storage on those kinds of devices. And Martin, you were already answering that on IRC, so do you want to answer that again on the video?
Yeah, sure. So your observation is quite correct. So the current phones have probably the same horsepower as laptops used to have like 3-4 years ago. So they are by all means fast enough, or almost fast enough. So the main issue is there's only so many things you can do with a human thick finger on a small touch screen. So the human device interface is the limiting factor here. So I don't think that anyone's ever going to do like an engineering app like building circuits or so on the tablet. But what should certainly happen, and what is indeed in our vision, is that you can carry around the device with your data and the programs, and then you can just attach it to a big TV and a keyboard and a mouse, and then your Ubuntu Touch phone UI suddenly turns into a desktop-ish UI, and then you can run all the applications which require like a bigger screen size or more precise input devices or a proper keyboard and so on. So that's certainly the goal, yeah. And I mean, there's already a lot of productivity applications packaged in Ubuntu which you can install today on a desktop. So the goal is just to make them available on the phone as well. Not on the phone, but like on these converged devices. Of course, that doesn't preclude someone from writing an application which can dynamically adjust to both settings. So you might have a very simple video editor right on the phone, and once you plug it in and you've got a big enough keyboard and mouse and so on, and screen, then this exposes a lot more functionality for like video editing, for example.
All right, and with that, we're out of time. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Thank you, Martin, for coming on and
my pleasure.
helping us answer these questions and giving us an update. We're going to try and have more people on, guests on like Martin, and interview them about what they've been doing. So if you have anybody that you would like to see join one of these, please let us know in IRC, and we will start to build up a list of guests that we want to have on the show. Thank you, Daniel and Nick, for being on. And you can follow us for more updates on youtube.com/UbuntuOnAir, also on Twitter as Ubuntu On Air. And we will be back next week at 1500 UTC with another update. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Bye.